Look at my neck, right? I get that check, right? I'm so blessed, right? Off of that jet pipe, off of that side, I'm in that new coupe. Got been fired. I said what I said, right? Yeah, I get that check, right? I'm so blessed, right? Off of that jet pipe, off of that, what is that? I'm in that new coupe. Got been fired. I get that check, right? Do no fake love, tell little bruh shape up. The way we lit, they throwin' shade, but they never say nothing. I'm that mage runner, I've been known to stay stunned. My drip on blade running, and the way we move, it ain't no creases on my A1s. 2021, about to be behind word in my day ones. So you shootin' blindside, I aim straight for the frame time. I don't take no L, my boy, I learned from y'all mistakes, son. I just up my rate, I made my way, get out of my lane, bruh. Now we got some traction, everything been so surreal. I'm trying to get used to keeping a check of how I feel. My ex is somewhat stressed, she dropped the ball, but that's a win. I just...
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, as well as one of the co-hosts of the Basement Radio Arcade podcast on the BRAP Network on YouTube. Back with another episode of Talking About Games. This is my monologue talking about games news and my feelings on games that I might currently be playing and other things of a gaming nature. So just a little bit of an opportunity for me to kind of branch out from some of the other podcasts where I don't have 100% control of the agenda, just to cover some of the topics that are of interest to me and dive into those some of those details. So let's get to it. The order that's in the show notes agenda is not going to be exactly that tonight. I'm going to jump around a little bit. I had some last minute changes of things that I wanted to cover. Also, I do not have any upfront game content as far as like things that I'm playing. I've not dipped back to check out Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora since I got started with my first few hours of that. So I'm planning on getting back into that probably later on this week. But I took a pit stop to play a lot of Call of Duty and Halo Infinite, and also some Dirt Rally 2.0 on PC. So we'll talk about those a little bit at the end of the show. But like I said, I'll probably get back to Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora later on the week. So first news story in the rundown that I want to talk about tonight is this news story over on Shacknews. China eases strict gaming stance following stock plummet. So let me go ahead and bring that story up on the screen first. Like I said, this story over on Shacknews by TJ Denzer, and I quote, reportedly a key official in the implementation of the strict rules on gaming in China has been removed following the panic. China went through a very intense time over the holidays when a new set of rules set to be imposed on the gaming industry caused stocks of several major companies to plummet. This caused a panic, which has since caused the Chinese government to reconsider its rules. Reportedly, not only has China softened its restrictions, but a key official behind the strict rules has been removed. So if you didn't catch this, a lot of this kerfuffle went on over the holidays, started a little bit before Christmas. It kind of caught me off guard. I was really surprised that this sort of kind of lockdown on this part of the commercial sector of China, that announcement would have gone out right before Christmas. So it was kind of weird. But these restrictions would have put monetary restrictions on the gaming industry. There would have been all types of clampdowns on daily login bonuses, spending limits, and other restrictions. Basically, ways that were designed to crimp the monetization, or that would have impacted the monetization of the gaming industry in China. So if you're not familiar with kind of how it works, China has trade restrictions on gaming companies so that, and it may be more widespread, the only part of it that I'm familiar with is the gaming, where if, say, Activision, and we're going to get back to them as the story pertains in a little bit, if Activision wants to publish a game in China, Activision, the corporation, can't do it. Of course, now it would obviously be Microsoft, but let's just go back. But they couldn't do that on their own. They actually have to utilize a Chinese company to essentially be their front man to publish that game in China. Then there are all sorts of other restrictions associated with it, like Chinese customer data. Associated data has to remain on servers that are physically in China and things of that nature. So this has kind of always been, for a very long time, not always, but for a very long time has been part of the kind of paradigm of gaming companies operating in China. So you can imagine, say, if Activision is publishing Call of Duty or Candy Crush or whatever, if there's an impact with restrictions that the Chinese government is imposing on games as they exist in China, then that's going to have an impact on their bottom line. They're going to get less interested in it. Activision has in the past partnered with NetEase, which most of the companies that I think most of us are familiar with will either be partnered with NetEase or Tencent. And so these types of things were going to be a very big deal. In fact, to the tune that there was basically an $80 billion slough off in stock prices, $80 billion US dollars, by the way, in value of between NetEase and Tencent. Tencent dropped 12% in value, and NetEase shares took a 25% drop. So as all of this started circulating around, basically the Chinese government got the word that this was not playing out very well and quickly decided to backtrack. And so when they indicated that they were not going to, put those trade restrictions on the gaming market, the response of the market was Reuters reported that NetEase went up 10%, recovering from its 25% plunge that it had the previous Friday. Also helped by local media reports, since also part of the pickup in the NetEase price was that on the eve and the day of Bobby Kotick exiting Activision, there had been a lot of friction between NetEase and Activision Blizzard in this past year, such that Activision Blizzard, I have to go back, I can't remember whether Activision Blizzard walked away from their deal with NetEase or NetEase said, no mas, we're out. But there was a lot of friction between those two companies. They walked away from their agreement on games being published. It was expected and hoped that Activision coming in under the Microsoft umbrella would allow that bridge to be repaired. And those talks have started now that Kotick is out. And so that helped with the 10% uplift in recovering from the 25% drop, following the walkback announcement of these trade restrictions. Yahoo Finance reported, and I quote, several analysts, including those from Citibank, or Citi, also said shortly after the new restrictions came out that Tencent and NetEase should not be significantly affected, but that did not prevent the shares of both companies from tumbling in U.S. trading. So that, going back to when these trade restrictions were initially announced, a lot of the analysts came out and said, no biggie, but it turned out to be actually quite significant in its impact. Al Jazeera reported after the trade restrictions got rolled back, the impact was immediate. Actually talking about the initial impact of the trade restrictions being announced. Impact was immediate, dealing a massive blow to the world's biggest games market. Investors went into a tailspin, leading to as much as an $80 billion in market value being wiped off from China's two biggest companies, industry leader Tencent Holdings and NetEase. So again, that's just kind of to go back and remind people who are trying to kind of follow the gaming industry that one of the largest markets in the world is the Chinese market, both in terms of mobile and PC gaming. Console footprint hasn't been as big in China in the last few years, but when there are small ripples like this, they wind up tending to have major impact. So those were kind of my thoughts on that topic. Let's go on to come back to what was actually going to be the first story of the run. Actually, I'm going to go to what would have been the last story, and talk a little bit about Portugal, because I mentioned I've had some comments on this on Brab's podcast and some other places that via the freelance work that I had an opportunity to do with GamesBeat before Jeff Grubb departed and went over to Giant Bomb. I was able to listen in to a few sessions of VC people, as well as kind of corporate investors who kind of look globally at the gaming market. And so this story caught my eye due to having worked in that space, or having, done some journalism in that space. Okay. This story over on GameIndustry.biz. Game dev co-working space, the Gaming Hub opens in Portugal. Fortis Games is one of many studios to occupy the space. So this story by Sophie McAvoy. Tech startup Unicorn Factory Lisboa has launched a new co-working space in Portugal's capital in partnership with Fortis Games. Known as the Gaming Hub, the building is divided on 2 floors with 13 private rooms and 12 co-working spaces, as reported by GamesBeat. Fortis Games will occupy 1 floor and is accompanied by other studios, including On Top Studios, Game Dev, Technico, composed of 50 university students and 18 virtual staff members from Volt Games, Infinity Games, and Didymo. So the reason this story caught my eye is because from working briefly and helping cover the GamesBeat Summit, I think in 2022, one of the things that I became aware of is that kind of globally, you get these hotbeds of game development studios and game development talent that kind of comes to the fore kind of cyclically. And so, it'll be in Russia, 1 year, and then you'll see, some things coalescing and happening over in Asia somewhere the next year. And then in a few months, you'll kind of start seeing indications and signals of things going on in South America. And so VC bankers and corporate investors keep an eye on these signals, and they see, 1 studio cropping up in a place and 2 studio cropping right in the start of this trend, and they kind of rush to those spaces and rush investment dollars to those spaces to lock down that talent, get them into deals, and get them cycled into greater exposure in the gaming market and gaming industry. And so this kind of caught my eye because there are apparently some things kind of going over in Portugal, which leads me to believe that maybe this is kind of the next major place that we're going to see, this type of outgrowth of talent in that geographic area, which would be good because, as I mentioned, unfortunately, one of the hotbeds of talent that was growing was the Ukraine before the war there started, and so that has obviously cooled investment dollars and the outgrowth of talent in that space. So it's good to hear that someplace else is kind of coming to the fore. So one of the other things that I read was over with a company called I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, so I'm going to call it Mobidictum, which is an organization that it's partially a news organization, but it also kind of looks around at talent and investment that's going on and where there are dollars going for gaming development. And they mentioned that as we previously co-organized an event with Gaming Hub in the facilities before its official opening, we will organize another networking event in Lisbon. So this is again a company who helps connect new talent with investors. It helps them network and helps them kind of get on their feet, and kind of helps geographically also in the outgrowth of commerce and the building of the economy in tech sectors, including gaming. We will organize another network event in Lisbon on April 15th through the 16th, 2024. We are reviewing sponsorship deals and will announce the sponsors for this event, which aligns with the city's efforts to foster innovation in high-growth sectors, including the video games industry, as showcased by the inauguration of the Gaming Hub by Unicorn Factory Lisboa and Lisbon City Council. The convergence of such initiatives highlights Lisbon's commitment to becoming a hub for innovation and collaboration in the gaming and technology sectors. Another news site, TMS, who also, in some ways, is kind of an equivalent of kind of VentureBeat and maybe ZDNet, that kind of focuses on, or maybe TechCrunch, who kind of focuses on, where there are dollars and business opportunities and outgrowth and new talent kind of on the come up in different geographic areas. Mentioned, this following quote: Portugal has definitely emerged as a rising star in the tech scene. Goes on to say, Lisbon is a city that is heavily invested in kind of cultivating startups. So it's kind of taking a Silicon Valley type approach to fostering outgrowth of talent there, but also attracting talent there. Maybe Austin Texas is another kind of example. In the U.S., where we've seen kind of similar efforts. There's also Porto, which is apparently a hotbed for tech innovation, and they're kind of vested in doing the same thing. And it goes on to mention, TMS goes on to mention the support systems that are being put in place for backing, things like, dollars that are being provided to, again, kind of like we see here in the Unicorn Factory, or with the Unicorn Factory creating the gaming hub, helping small companies, small businesses absorb the cost that might normally be impacting them in terms of real estate. Right now that we're in an area post-pandemic where so many gaming companies and so many gaming employees are working remotely, it's even more of an impact, particularly for small businesses, to pay significant prices for commercial real estate, when the fact is that they may only need that commercial real estate on a limited basis. So it's nice to see this kind of thing going on in Portugal to help kind of defray some of those costs. TMS also mentions that Lisbon is like a magnet for talent, attracting visionaries and innovators from all over the world. So again, kind of has that smacks of, kind of what we've seen in Austin. Lisbon is also the place that the Web Summit conference is held. Porto, like I said, has top-notch has top-notch universities and research centers. And so that's one of the reasons, again, we kind of look and we see the Savannah College of Art and Design, or SCAD, and how the founders of Pixar kind of came out of that university, and how that has impacted, not only the outgrowth of SCAD, but the economic impact on Savannah as well, which has benefited some people, but has also definitely been a negative impact to many other people down there. It also, like I said, support system being put in place, government-backed initiatives, co-working spaces and accelerators, and then a healthy network to help those developers kind of get around the industry. So that article caught my eye, and it's like I said, it's good to see those things happening in other economic areas that can use the boost. I want to talk a little bit now about Nintendo. Let me bring this article up. This would have been the start of tonight's discussion, but I wanted to talk a little bit about China first. So StreamYard always screws me up. Super Mario Maker Miyamoto has no plans to retire from Nintendo. I'm thinking about the day that I fall over. And so here, I'll just kind of kick off the top of the article. Shigeru Miyamoto supposedly has no plans to retire from Nintendo, though his role at the company has shifted dramatically. Miyamoto has worked at the company for over 45 years, creating several of the industry's most prominent mascots, such as Zelda and Mario, influencing every piece of Nintendo hardware from the NES to the Switch, and shaping video games as we know them today. But the world's most important game designer plans to stop working when he physically can't anymore. So in recent weeks, I've talked a little bit about succession planning and how that happens in large corporations, and in particular in tech corporations. And so it is a normal thing, not unusual thing for large corporations to tag their high potential employees, kind of manage their careers, shuffle them around, make sure that they get exposed to different parts of the business, identify them. Sometimes it's even fairly well mapped, like who they're going to be succeeding, and make sure that those people are put on those paths. One of the differences that I perceive in the gaming space, which is a creative space, is that often those things are not necessarily driven entirely by dollars or engineering experience. A lot of those are heavily personality based, and of course there's personality based decisions that get made in corporate America as well, but in the creative space it seems like I see that even more so, sometimes seen as much as shakeups that may happen as people come in and leave the company, but also sometimes where like I said, there is that discipline and that rigor out in corporate America and kind of tech corporate America, but maybe not be as much so in the gaming industry. One of the analogs that I thought about was, the gaming industry has been relatively slow in terms of some other components of the enterprise or in enterprise markets to turn to agile software development. They were there were still consultants being paid very large amounts of money to help gaming companies implement Agile. If we in conjunction with like the Wolverine leak, there are people running around playing, the alpha builds and things. And one of the things that I mentioned was that, people need to keep in mind, because people are trying to render judgment and render opinions based on alpha builds. And I'm like, we need to keep in mind that like the gaming industry, if you go back to maybe 2.5 decades, there wasn't even really the concept of an alpha build, at least not like this early in the development pipeline, because game development teams would work for years on a project before anything was playable and executable. And so, incorporating part of the Agile methodology has helped in going to that notion of, making a playable, executable increment of code out of a software development project. And so, again, there's a rush to render judgment on things like that, like alpha builds. But my point is that the gaming industry is sometimes, behind the curve from the rest of enterprise in taking on certain methods. And other ones, they're ahead of the curve, right? But sometimes they're behind. And so, this is one area at Nintendo where we see good examples of good succession planning apparently taking place. Miyamoto mentions a quote in here. I can't remember exactly where it is, but he mentions that now I'm having a problem. Oh, wait, it is. The newest Super Mario and Zelda games have been largely built by newer, younger teams. And this is one of the things that I asserted when Breath of the Wild first came out. And I was like, you look at the design of Breath of the Wild, and it incorporates so many, in my opinion, Western derivatives of game design that hadn't previously been incorporated in Zelda games before. And there were discussions then that, there were some younger members of the team taking a stronger hand in kind of the design vision of what Zelda, of what Breath of the Wild became. So, again, that's part of succession planning, right? Getting people into more senior areas of leadership, letting them have a stronger hand in design and in product development, so that when they're going to be creative directors, it's not like they are, taking on a directive part of the project, right, for the first time ever, so good training as well. And so around the rest of the industry, we also see things like that, where at Sony Santa Monica, you had Cory Barlog hand off the baton to a different director to shepherd God of War Ragnarok. But then, I thought, as I kind of read this article and thought about what's going on in Nintendo, I thought about one of the areas where, we may not necessarily be seeing that is at Naughty Dog. And so, Druckmann has apparently had part of his attention dragged off to go, shepherd and look over The Last of Us in production of that show. And in the meantime, it hasn't really been reported, or it hasn't been said, and maybe insiders know, but the rest of us who are out on the periphery don't. I haven't really heard mention of any kind of changing of the guard going on there. And so, admittedly, that's due to, like I said, kind of a lack of transparency, and so we don't know that it's an issue. But like I said, as Druckmann focuses on television show and other things, we haven't heard those names crop up, who you might normally expect to see as evidence of a succession plan. And so this is, to me, is kind of a difference, right, in kind of how Sony and Nintendo are approaching creative leadership shifts in its focus. I think we actually kind of see a little bit of this going on the corporate side. A lot of people ran around and talked about how there were concerns about what was going on with Bungie and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, well, if you really want to focus on an area that I think where there's actually valid and credible concern, I would look at what's going on the corporate side, and the fact that Totoki has asserted and become, the stand-in CEO of PlayStation while they conduct the search, which means to me they're not promoting someone from inside to be PlayStation CEO. At least that's not their current plan. It seems to indicate to me that they're looking outside and external to the company, maybe because of where the PlayStation business is going to kind of shift, or where the market dynamic has shifted with Microsoft with Xbox making the acquisition of Activision. And so, that'll be interesting to see how that continues to unfold. Some notes on Miyamoto's career. In Super Mario Brothers 3, which rolled out across multiple regions between 1988 and 1991, published first in Japan in 88, North America in 89 on the Famicom, and then in early 1990 in North America on the NES. Each of Bowser's children have unique personalities and appearances, and that's because Miyamoto based them on 7 of his programmers to pay tribute to their work on the game, which took a little bit more than 2 years to complete. So I found some of this information looking at Wikipedia, and then also going off to some other articles of interviews that he's done over the last couple of decades. He was part of the brain trust that came up with the Nintendo Wii, and he won a poll amongst 9,000 developers who was their ultimate development hero. Will Wright came in third, who did Spore and also The Sims, and he was quoted as saying, meaning Miyamoto, approaches the games playfully, which seems kind of obvious, but most people don't. And he approaches things from the player's point of view, which is part of his magic. Also, the creative mind behind some of the games that frequent the top 10 and various best of all time lists, including Super Mario Brothers and The Legend of Zelda. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Next thing that I want to talk about was the malware issue that happened over the holidays with Slay the Spire, the Downfall mod. But I do want to get a quick spot of coffee because I'm getting a little dry. So give me just 1 second. Okay, so this story over on Game Developer, which I can't remember what the name of the site was before. I'm sure I should know. It was an old site it was a site that I used to have bookmarked, but now I still have it bookmarked, but now it's called Game Developer. Slay the Spire Downfall mod used to spread malware, say devs. And so I quote at the start of the article, Table 9, the developer behind Slay the Spire's popular Downfall mod, informed players about a recent security breach that let hackers release malware via Steam. By the way, this story ran between Christmas and New Year's. So the breach hit on Christmas Day and tried stealing users' passwords from their internet browsers, along with messaging apps Discord and Telegram. Files that contain password were also targeted. So it goes through the series of kind of the forensic, breakdown of how this happened. But basically, the pathway between where the mod studio uploaded their files to Steam was compromised, and so the hacker was able to upload and have a different payload deposited there for a period of about 1 hour was how long the situation existed. And so during that time period, anybody who downloaded those files was then subject to this vulnerability. And so there was a series of kind of checklists of were you or were you not vulnerable? It was all based around whether or not you had actually downloaded the mod during this time frame. So, at the end of the day, this is obviously a lesson learned, as I constantly preach to people about security and taking responsibility for your data, taking responsibility for your security, practicing good, security hygiene and health practices in the digital world. But this is also an interesting thing because PC gamers have so many different opinions about mods. A lot of PC gamers are like, that is the reason I game on PC. I'm a huge PC player. That is probably where I spend the vast majority of my time. I do not do mods. I think the only game that I actually typically download mods for is World of Warships. There's a package called Mod Nation, and the only reason I download it is because the person who pulls that together, as far as I can tell, it's widely used by the community, and I hope and believe that there's some vetting from a security perspective of all the files that are pulled into that aggregator. I don't mind my point is I don't mind downloading things that come down through some type of formal store or a marketplace or something of that nature. But I'm just not interested in going to a particular developer's personal website to download a mod. And I guess on a few other occasions I've done maybe I need to walk that back just a tad for something like Falcon 4.0, which was one of my favorite games in the early 2000s. That game has a mod package that you download basically to make the game run because it never really ran particularly well. And so a few other things I bought. I think there's a Max Payne like total conversion that fixes the audio playing during like the comic book, the graphic novel section, interludes in between levels. And so maybe there are things like that. But in general, like I said, I don't, the people who like download Fallout and then download like, a dozen, 24 mods or Skyrim or something like that. That's just not a practice that I take, mainly because of, my fear of vulnerabilities like this. So it's just a thing that you kind of have to be conscious of and make choices about. Like I said, the point of the code transaction on Steam and the vulnerability thereof was for about 1 hour. At the time of this writing, the Discord accounts associated with the developer of the mod were still compromised. So I do want to clarify on that and specify that is the developer of the mod for Slay the Spire, not Slay the Spire itself. So next story I want to talk about is Star Wars Outlaws coming out in late 2024. So let me get that story up on the screen. So this was kind of an interesting series of events. This story up over on IGN by Ryan Disdale. Ubisoft reached out to IGN to say that the late 2024 timing had been updated to a correct release window of 2024. The original story is below. So I'm not going to read through the entire story because of course the entire story has now been walked back. But basically there was a Disney Parks blog post which talked about, hey, in 2024, these are all of the Disney IP experiences you're going to be able to partake in, whether it be a movie or a theme park or some other amusement park like Epcot and Universal or whatever, I think had a thing in there. But it was a laundry list of, I want to say it was like over 20 like descriptions of experiences you would have. And when it got down to talk about Star Wars Outlaws, it said that the game was coming out in late 2024. Now, I think this was already a relatively strong suspicion. There was an Ubisoft earnings call at the tail end of 2023 where there was mention that there was a game of major significance that had been expected to come out earlier in one of the quarters of the calendar year that had been moved back. And there was a very strong suspicion that because it was like the only major big AAA game in their portfolio that they were putting out, theoretically in the first half of the year, is that it must have been Star Wars Outlaws. So like I said, the Disney Park blog post and Ubisoft apparently got together, sorted those things out, and the Disney Park blog post was changed. If you go to that blog post now, there's zero mention localizing the release date of Star Wars Outlaws to late 2024. So the big question now is kind of why. It is possible because if Ubisoft has to delay that game further and it slips out of calendar year 2024, they may not want to reveal that. For competitive purposes, they may not want to reveal that they're planning on a holiday release because that starts the whole gamesmanship of chess pieces of who's releasing what in what week of the holiday season. I'm not sure. But, background on Star Wars Outlaws, if you're not already familiar, I think most people are. The game introduces scoundrel Kay Vess in the first ever open world Star Wars game. It was unveiled last summer by one of my favorite studios, arguably maybe my favorite studio, Massive Entertainment, who just put out Avatar Frontiers of Pandora this month. And so that studio is definitely on the drumbeat and trying to crank stuff out. It was announced or made reference to in 2021. At that time, I think Ubisoft made mention that the team had been working on it for a couple of years. But since then, we've come to realize and understand that the team has been working on that game since 2019. And so it coming out in 2024, kind of right on par for the course for big AAA games coming out of big teams at 5 years. let's hope that it's sticks the landing, right, in terms of quality, particularly for the PC port, but also that it makes it on time. Next story I want to talk about is Starfield doesn't win Steam Game of the Year, but it snags a surprising award instead. So this story over on PC Games, and the 2023 Steam Awards are here with titles for this year's best and biggest games, with Bethesda taking a surprising one home for Starfield. Starfield has had a rocky post-launch period with mixed reviews and no Game of the Year wins aside from its Xbox title. The 2023 Steam Awards are now in, with all of Valve's player-voted wins, though, and Bethesda's massive Interstellar RPG is taking one of the event's titles home. Despite a recent uptick in negative feedback on Steam, Starfield now boasts the most innovative gameplay award. And so this is the JPEG of the awards that were given out, ostensibly voted on by the Steam user community. So you have Game of the Year, Baldur's Gate 3, Labor of Love, Red Dead Redemption 2, Best on Steam Deck, Hogwarts Legacy, Outstanding Visual title, Atomic Heart, which is interesting because that game came out very early, I think January or February of 2023, so based on recency bias. And there's lots of negative opinions and thoughts on Atomic Heart, but it's, interesting and I guess good from a community uptake perspective that people remembered a game that came out that earlier in the year. Starfield coming in with most innovative gameplay. Best game you suck at was Sifu. Best soundtrack was Tilu, the remake on PC. Outstanding story-rich game was also Baldur's Gate 3, and Sit Back and Relax, Dave the Diver. So here we are with Starfield in the mix again. Current Steam user community reviews at the time that I put this article in the rundown were mostly negative for recent at 29%, mixed for their overall reviews at 64%. In the wake of Starfield winning most innovative gameplay, there was also a huge surge in negative reviews. And so, in addition to just the negative reviews that are there on Steam because of PC gamers who have, again, if you're not familiar with the Steam review framework, in order to review a game on Steam, you have to have actually purchased it. There's all types of additional data on Steam reviews that tell you how long the person's played it, whether or not they returned the game and got a refund, blah, 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 blah. And so for me, they are the one community who I actually trust. Now, talking to Paul's Gaming back and forth on Twitter, I will say I trust them in their reviews. Where I often have problems is in resolving the ambiguity between what their reviews say versus other things that the Steam community does, or signals that you get from the Steam community, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Also, just before they won this award, again, trying to correlate, right, these things, Starfield had dropped out of the top 100 most played on Steam as of early January, about January 2nd. Starfield had been in the top of Steam user most played with concurrent player count on Steam since its launch in September for a 3-month run right into December, and had just dropped out. And so here we go with the questions why. It may have been that amongst big budget AAA titles, why did they win the award, right? It may have been that amongst big budget AAA titles, there may have just been enough players who felt that Starfield's all-you-can-eat buffet-style approach of melding several different concepts from amongst every very popular niche genres kind of gave you a big center of mass of gamers of a particular mix, a particular demographic, basically a big amalgamation of niche players, right? That kind of rallied around Starfield because they hadn't gotten a game that had all of those particular things in it, all together. My own comment about every time I play Starfield, which is that I think about every other game that does Shtick X better. The same could also be said of the opposite. So basically, when I play Starfield, I think, Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen are better space sims than this from a flight model perspective. Or, there's this game that is a better RPG than Starfield, or this game has better voice acting than Starfield. However, by that same token, you can also say neither Elite Dangerous nor Star Citizen, which boast, like I said, much better flight models, are as good of an RPG, or is as good of a storytelling framework, has as good of a storytelling framework. You might say, yeah, Starfield is not as good as an RPG as Baldur's Gate 3, but it's not in space. And some niche players, that's their thing, and that's what they want. I had the fun that I had in Starfield, I had a lot of fun because I'm a big sci-fi fan, and I had a lot of fun from the little bits of nostalgia kind of sprinkled throughout, and I had a lot of fun of the nod to Star Trek: The Next Generation. I had a huge amount of fun in the nod to Freelancer. So sprinkling little things like that throughout would have hooked a not insignificant number of people, and you have people who wanted to get out and explore space and feel and have a feeling associated with that and conveyed from that's different than walking around Tamriel or walking period versus getting in a spaceship. And that's, again, not to say that that's valid, but just to pick at again, some of the kind of the forensics behind how did this game get this award. Look, in general, I mean, my personal feeling is I would have called Starfield a C game. To me, it was high 60s, low 70s for doing that very thing, having little pieces of sci-fi stuff that I love scattered throughout, but some of the very particular things that really jazzed me up, like the spaceship builder. But it failed to stick the landing in excellence and execution due to poor onboarding, a meandering narrative with poor branching control, a lot of run and fetch side missions, and scoring very low on my overall quality of life meter. Oh, and by the way, the 30 frames per second and loading screens, which people call it concern trolling, but those things bother me because I'm a PC player. There are things that I want. There are things that I expect. When I buy a $500 console, right, in an era where it was marketed as 60 frames per second, and having a lot of performance, then I did the things that I got out of Starfield that were notionally sacrificed, or that I got because 60 frames per second was sacrificed, were not necessarily things that really moved the needle for me. But at any rate, when we talk about kind of, what we see in the Steam user community and the conversation that goes on around Starfield, it's kind of a lot of what I've seen over the last, couple of decades with regards to Bethesda in general. It's a lot of people giving them a pass, them and the game a pass, because it's a Bethesda game, and because it did better in terms of the bar against historical bug levels, and because it's in space, and because it's this niche thing or that niche thing. But to me, that's all a conversation that skates away from, is it a good game overall? It's good for a Bethesda game. You have to know what a Bethesda game is. You have to have different expectations. I wasn't expecting this or that. These are all things that move the goalposts, right? Great on a curve, set a low bar. I like the game. I like Starfield. I spent 40 hours or so in it. Not as much as some, people who love Starfield, right? But I did like Starfield, and I spent more time in it than I'm normally given to give a game, particularly for the amount of time that I spend in it waiting for it to kind of hit a tip over point, right? Normally with most games, if I'm not really digging it, I definitely don't hang in for 20 something hours, right? Expecting it to hit an apogee and get good. I love, like I said, all the nods to Star Trek, no doubt about that. But I'm able to abstract my own personal feelings and evaluate the game against the rest of the industry and land on a different result than a lot of people look at, right, the game from. Like, I can look at a game and say, I like this game, I love this game, but I understand that this game isn't going to have like the traction with the wider mainstream, right, gaming addressable market. And besides that, I also again, coming from the software engineering background, like, I don't like it has less bugs than a Bethesda game. That's not a thing for me. For me and for a lot of other consumers, Bethesda isn't some bellwether or standard setter, or it doesn't set a bar by which everyone else, including themselves, gets graded. In the times before Fallout 76, I had always said, like, Bethesda fans, give them a pass, and the result has been that, in my opinion, they've now fallen out of grace. I've written about my denouement theory, if anybody has read that, and this whole topic of kind of the history of the industry and the rough timeline that you will expect to see a studio kind of hit an apogee, and then where there will be on a decline, and how that's worsened when the creative lead or the design ethos and design philosophy is built kind of around a cult of personality, and that's what drives it. Again, we go back to like the earlier story about succession planning. Like, where is that? Who is taking up those reins? Who's getting that baton? If Bethesda is Todd Howard's thing, then what happens as Todd Howard transitions out? So that all being said, maybe, just maybe, Starfield had enough of a following to carry them to this kind of award. For me, I'm not buying just yet the notion that this was a bow wave of trolling that resulted in like a farcical award, like a cynical award, a satirical award. I think there's more to it than that. I don't agree with it getting that award personally, but I think that despite the negative reviews, and again, we have the sales numbers of badly regarded games on Steam that still move good revenue. So we've seen this with Battlefield 2042, for instance, right? Negatively reviewed, poorly regarded, but still sold well. And I'm like, how is this game selling well if people are paying money for this game? This is not a free-to-play game. But at any rate, there's something there. Even if it's like a guilty pleasure effect, right? From people who like, this isn't great, but it's still the thing that stimulates me. So I'm going to get on with it. We at least know that Starfield had a big player base of numbers, and a lot of people have been playing it. And so maybe there were thoughts there enough to give it a nod, as a counter to all the disregard that it's been shown in other venues. So at least, Starfield got something, got some recognition. I mean, it's kind of a shame. I think Slow-Mo maybe put out a poll or did something where I had to kind of go back and kind of think about what were my 4 favorite games of last year. And one of the things that has happened over the years on E2KG, we've hit a point where maybe 2017, 2018, I had this epiphany where I was like, look, we need to look at the games that we spend the most time in when we do our gaming superlative awards at the end of the year. And I was like, look, when we're picking things to put in these categories, we need to give regards for not just the things that we think and that we feel like moved us and motivated us, but we need to take some time to go back and look at the data of where we spent the most time. And that was, like I said, 2017, 2018. I think 2018 was when I was like, despite all my grousing of Destiny 2, I went back and looked at it and I was like, dude, you spend a lot of time playing Destiny 2. And I was like, okay, from that point forward, like every time, I rack and stack throughout the year, I'm like, I have to take a look at the numbers and see where I spent my time. And like I said, I spent a ton of time in Starfield in a year when a lot of other good games came out. And so, while I personally feel that, Starfield shouldn't have been nominated right into one of the TGAs, but I also feel that way about, I recommended the Digital Foundry podcast that talked about the worst PC ports of the year. I also felt the same way about a lot of those games on that list. Like, I felt like, Star Wars Jedi Survivor had no business whatsoever being mentioned by anyone as being a contender for Game of the Year, because to me, as a PC gamer, performance matters. And so, in my mind, Starfield shouldn't have been there. However, when put on the spot and asked what were my 4 favorite games of the year, Starfield was still in that top 4, because of the, partially because of the amount of time that I spent in it, partially because of what I talked about tonight, and the things that motivated me and the things that stimulated me while playing the game. And so again, it is possible to have that conversation on 2 different tracks and acknowledge what a game does for you, but then also acknowledge, how that game might impact other people. I think what will be actually the last news story that I want to cover very quickly, because now it's top of mind even more, given the recent earthquake and tsunami in Japan. Prepare to pay more for your next SSD. This story over, again, on PC Games In by Samuel Willits. The arrival of PCIe Gen 5 drives has sent the cost of Gen 4 and 3 drives tumbling downwards in recent months, but we may soon see SSD prices rise in the near future. Sadly, this likely won't be a minor rise. This pricing shift will likely affect both the best SSDs and more budget offerings. Likewise, we can expect manufacturers across the board, including Samsung and Western Digital, to raise the cost of their drives. Now, this story was just based on supply and demand that was being seen on the market, and this was actually before, I want to say, it's showing as just written one day ago, but I want to say this was before, I think this was before the tsunami hit. So I'm not sure that this date from their CMS is accurate. I think this was just before we started getting reports back. So since this has been written, the net impact in Japan to NAND manufacturing facilities may be greater. While I was pulling together the notes for this show, there were mentions that a lot of those factories have been shut down because they need to have safety inspections conducted by the plants themselves, as well as international regulators, to validate that there's not safety concerns for workers going back in there, that they're not going to be, some other kind of major catastrophe from people trying to re-enter the plant. And so we had this in 2011 when I think Thailand had an earthquake or a tsunami, and NAND prices were impacted and NAND prices went up. I didn't have a chance to track it down, but I want to say that I thought that in late '99, maybe early 2000, when there was a significant gas price increase, particularly in the West Coast states, that I think there was also a natural disaster in East Asia, where that had also impacted RAM prices at the time. And I think this was actually at the point where they were trying to make Rambus a thing. And I think a lot of those plants that were engaged in trying to make Rambus also were severely impacted, and that was one of the things that led to its death knell as well. But it also wasn't a very popular memory standard that nobody was particularly interested in, despite the fact that Intel was trying to hawk it. But I want to say, if my memory is correct, I think that was going on at that time as well. So we've had these instances where, due to natural disasters, we have had components for PC builders impacted in terms of supply going down and prices going up. So I would definitely say, look, there were some pretty great prices on SSDs over the holidays. I don't know if people are already kind of trying to, starting to Scrooge and Grinch the prices, but I would definitely say if there are any kind of post-holiday sales you can still get a hold of, I would definitely go out and get yourself an SSD. I know Ramon was talking earlier today about that he's got a 2 terabyte drive now. Look, my feelings on storage is it doesn't hurt to stock up. So if you can grab another 2 terabyte NVMe PCIe drive, I think it would behoove you to do so. If you had a RAM upgrade contemplated for 2024, it might be a good idea for you to go ahead and grab that now if you can still find it. Like I said, there's the possibility that people that Newegg and Amazon and B&H are already starting to jack prices up, but it wouldn't, if you can find one, it wouldn't be good to go out there and go ahead and grab it and just keep it for a rainy day or whenever you get around to doing that upgrade that you were thinking about doing. Game-wise, as far as what I've been playing, like I said, I haven't gotten back to Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. Hold on, I'm going to take a quick sec here. I've wound up spending the time playing, like I said, a lot of Call of Duty, a lot of Halo Infinite, and some Dirt Rally. There's Dirt Rally 2.0 Let's Play or Highlight Reel or whatever up on the Rounding Off Infinity channel. I set up the TRT 300 RS, the Thrustmaster T300 RS wheel and pedals back at my other battle station across the other side of the room for that. I've had a really good time with it. There's a guy, I'm gonna have to find his name. I can't remember it right off the top of my head, but there's one guy who does, his whole website is, here are the optimal settings for every single wheel and pedal set. in every single racing game, and then he updates it when patches come out and things like that. So I use that as a reference, and he has never steered me wrong. So I've had an opportunity to do that. I've also been fiddling with settings. So talking to Slow-Mo, he asked me a question while we were playing, because I told him I think I was having some. It was when I was discovering that I was having some network problems and that switch over on the other side of the room was going bad. And we were talking about PC performance and what I was seeing in the game, and I mentioned what my GPU temperatures were, which are really, really low. And he said, "Are you playing on low settings?" And I wasn't playing on low settings, but his point of questioning, and another one that somebody else asked me. Now they were a little bit off, because I had posted some specs of what I was seeing on PC performance for Halo Infinite, and he was like, can your rig, and this was on the new rig that I just built that is running a 7800 X3D and an RTX 4080. And he said, shouldn't you be able to do 4K? And I was like, but when I'm playing a first-person shooter PvP, like, I don't care about 4K, blah, blah, blah. So, but that point of questioning and Slow-Mo's question made me realize there is such a thing as maybe taking it too far. And so maybe, I'm a mid player. I'm not, some pro level like PvP shooter. It's probably likely that I'm not going to play that much better between, getting 165 frames versus 120 frames. And so I've been going back to Call of Duty and Halo Infinite and kind of really cranking everything up in terms of, graphic effects that I have, visual fidelity that I have in the game. And actually, it's never mattered to me before, but now that I'm doing it, I do have to kind of shrug and admit it is kind of a slightly better experience. So in Halo Infinite, I basically have everything max, everything on ultra except I think texture fill is on high, or textures are on high, and I think it's a 3D geometry or something like that in the game that are set for high, and that has me using like 6.05 gigabytes of VRAM on an 8 gigabyte card. And I'm still getting like 100 and some, typically between 109 and 127 frames, I would say. But even so, because on Halo Infinite you'll see performance float a lot based on the map. So certain maps are just more performance, have a greater impact on performance based on the geometry and the textures on that particular map. So I do see maps where I see, from mid 120s up to like 137. And so for cranking all those graphic settings up, I'm not really experiencing that much of an impact on Halo Infinite. On Call of Duty, I think I have everything turned up except ray tracing, which I think in Modern Warfare 3, that setting says that the ray tracing and path tracing is only in the menus, so it doesn't actually have any impact on gameplay. So I think I have everything cranked up there, and both basically, there were times in competitive PvP shooters I was still playing at 1080p, but I would go back and forth between playing half the time in 1080p and half the time in 1440p. So I'm just putting all on 1440p, and I'm just starting to crank everything up. And so the Dirt Rally 2.0 Let's Play that is up, posted on the site, also kind of follows that philosophy. I'm pretty sure I have everything cranked up on Dirt Rally 2.0 also, which is also, kind of an older game. I think 2019 for Dirt Rally 2.0, maybe earlier. So I've been having a good time going back and playing those. Halo Infinite, I'm still trying to settle on where my feelings are, probably because I'm more concerned about playing than going off and doing a bunch of, financial research on the Battle Pass. I've seen some of the commentary online where, the way I feel about what's going on with Season 5 is that they've taken the Battle Pass, which had historically been 100 tiers, they've cut that in half, and now it's only 50 tiers. And then they I think I haven't checked, but I think they still charge you the same price for the premium Battle Pass, which admittedly, when you pay that, right, the good deal of it is you have that Battle Pass in perpetuity, so you can always earn those awards whether or not you're playing after the season or whatever. It's just a matter of activating that particular pass. But they've cut the tiers in half, and then they have replaced that with these operation tiers that so these operation tiers are basically limited time events that happen for I think a 2-week span of time. You have to basically deactivate your season 5 battle pass and activate the operation battle pass. Those operation battle pass have 20 tiers. They've done 2 so far this season. I think they're going to do a 3rd. I'm not absolutely certain. I think what I've seen is that this season is supposed to end the end of January. But basically, they pop these operations, and then if you want to get all the rewards for the entire season, you basically have to stop earning against your season 5 battle pass and then go off and do these things. Again, if you're you can buy them, and you can buy the premiums, which give you access to that stuff all the time, so you don't really have to do that. But it's what you're incentivized to do. And so I don't know that I feel super great about how that's kind of happened, and I feel like it's kind of, it feels like a little bit of manipulation. But I have also seen people who have posted stuff online that say, hey, look, if you look back at the historical battle pass, you're still getting the exact same amount of content, which that may be good, but it still means that it seems like there's some type of manipulation going on around the notion of kind of virtual scarcity or false scarcity and limited time, which we don't need it. Like, I don't need it. Like, it's hard enough to try and fit everything in without, this notion that a thing's going to go away or you have a limited time to do a thing. And like I said, I don't know that I feel super great about being charged the same amount that we always have for the battle pass when it has 50% of the content, the premium battle pass, and then being charged an additional amount for these limited time operational battle passes if you want to be able to earn the awards in perpetuity. So, like I said, there's some skinny angles and wiggles there where, you should be able to kind of think yourself out of and escape any notion that you are being kind of fleeced. But at the end of the day, like I said, it doesn't, like I said, just forcing me through those mental gymnastics of having to think through that. I would just rather not be bothered. I'm like, look, just give us the 100 tier battle pass. Right, leave it the premium. I don't understand the need for these other things, and I think part of the reason these things are in place are to enable people who don't want to pay and just want to play the free tiers, allow them the feeling that they can access all the same rewards if they kind of drop what they're doing and prioritize getting those things done on the limited time. Because then, if you don't pay for the premium battle pass, then once that time window is over, then you don't have access to them. So it just feels like, some unnecessary, Sturm and Drang that I would just as soon not be bothered with, which is why I then pay for the premium battle pass, so I'm not bothered by it. But that's where we are. But I'm having a good time playing it. One thing I really like about what Halo Infinite is doing now is they're doing the thing that Call of Duty Mobile does, which I really gotta tip my hat off to Tencent. Because what they do is what I would wish the full version of Call of Duty would do, which is, look, and I've written this up, and I've written this model up, and I've talked about like what a game as a service needs to do, right? You need to have cosmetics, you need to have maps, you need to have LTEs and LTMs, and you need to cycle those, and those need to be sprinkled out, and there needs to be 50% of your new content needs to be cosmetics, 20% needs to be 20, 25, 30% needs to be maps, right? Some X percentage of LTMs and LTEs, blah, blah, blah. And then you need to orient your budget, right, around those, right, the level of effort that's associated with your team. Like, cosmetics really shouldn't take a ton of effort, right? Once you get the basic framework in place, that should be fairly well repeatable, so you kind of get a huge bang for the buck by putting a lot of effort up front in the project. But at any rate, me personally, as a player, what I'm stimulated by and what I'm motivated by out of that bucket of like grocery shopping list stuff is maps. Like, that's what turns me on and makes me feel like I'm getting my money out of a game as a service. That refresh of new maps that come in every season. And so, but here's my thing. Game designers, like, look, when you drop new maps, yes, I want to play the new maps, but I don't want to sacrifice the old maps, right? Like the purpose and the intent to me of you providing new maps is to broaden the variety that's available, not take the old maps away. And so we see, games that do this, they drop some old maps, or what they normally really do is they reduce kind of the parametrics of the rotation of the older maps, right? And so you're getting the newer maps more frequently. You're getting the older maps sometimes. Sometimes some old maps do get squeezed out. Like if there were 12 old maps, maybe 3 or 4 of them kind of go out of the rotation for a period of time. I would just rather like bring the new maps in and just keep the rotation fairly equal amongst them. Maybe you can heighten the frequency for the new maps for the first couple of weeks of the season, but then after that, I just want to play on all the maps. So on Halo Infinite, I am starting to see a higher frequency of the older maps kind of come into the map rotation, which I really like. I like going back and playing on Bazaar. I like Behemoth and Catalyst and some of these other maps going on. I haven't seen Rocket Launcher or Launchpad or whatever come back, which is the map that I know Brap hates. Which is fine. But it's good to see some of those old maps back. Community play dynamic is really weird right now. I think you have a lot of new people who just got Xboxes who are playing. And I don't know. I'm seeing weird things. Like I go in and I play a team, and sometimes I'm going up against an OP team who just like knows maps and knows the new maps, right? Even which I don't know yet because I just haven't had as much time with them. But they do things like they lock down an area. They occupy like 4 corners of the map, so they have crossing fields of fire for anybody cutting across the center. I mean, just all types of crazy stuff. But I also see teams that I'm like, dude, these people are not going for active camo. They're not going for overshield. Like they are literally just walking right by like power-ups. Like I played a team today. I can't remember what the new names of some of the new maps are. But they literally just left overshield, like unobtained, like multiple respawns in a row. And I'm like, what is going on here? So I think we just have some new people who are coming in the fold who don't play, which is good, because one of the things that has been problematic with Halo Infinite has been, to me, a dearth of player community. Those instances that I've talked about on those nights where I've gone into a mode and it's just taken forever to matchmake, or I've seen the same player like over and over again in like 3 or 4 matches because the numbers just aren't there for the people who are playing. So I've had a good time. I've had a chance to mix up some of the modes this week and play Super Fiesta, which I'm not even sure like what Super Fiesta is versus regular Fiesta, but had a chance to play Fiesta, some of the free-for-all modes. I had a really good time playing some FFA the other night, and not seeing my most hated mode in Halo Infinite, Oddball. So it was nice to have that opportunity to play without being bothered by Oddball, because it's a thing that I can't stand. So anyway, that's what I've been up to. I am not sure. I said I was going to start figuring this out. We'll see what happens with news tomorrow. I may actually jump on and talk about gaming news if anything significant pops. But otherwise, just keep an eye out on the front page of the YouTube channel, as well as, hey Glacian3, thanks so much for swinging by the live stream. Appreciate you. But keep an eye on the front page of the YouTube channel, as well as on social media. I'll try and get better about, and like I said, about announcing when I'm going to go live and talking about games. Not super interested in, the console warriors and everybody swinging over here. So, we'll try and keep a fairly low profile, but I'll try and get the word out a little bit. So thanks very much for anybody who happened to swing through and join the live stream in the chat. Thanks, Glacian, for stopping through. I appreciate you. For anybody out there who happens to watch the archive version of this episode of Talking About Games on the Rounding Off Affinity gaming channel on YouTube, I appreciate you as well. Please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can just receive a notification whenever I post new content. Like I said, keep an eye out on social media on the front page of the YouTube channel. See if I'm going live tomorrow. Otherwise, it will probably be sometime this weekend or going into next week, all depending on kind of what happens with the news cycle and what topics come up. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, play the games that you like, come here to talk to me about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, and one of the co-hosts of the Basement Radio Arcade podcast on the BRAP channel on YouTube. E2KG Enough to Keep Going will be back this Sunday night. The guys and I have been on hiatus, but we will be back Sunday night at 8:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, doing our normal shtick of running down the gaming news and the games that we have been playing. So without much further ado, that's going to do it for me. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. I will talk to you guys soon. I'm out of here.